And if anyone should get guns, it should be trans Americans, okay? Because I'm worried for them. I'm worried that the right-wing lunatics are going to attack them as they have over and over again. And by the way, it's not just right-wing lunatics, other people attack trans folks as well.
Hey folks, Dale Jackson here. Today we're going to talk more about that terrible shooting at the Christian school in Nashville, where a trans shooter decided that if their children were not going to be safe, your children were not going to be safe. And while that argument is incredibly terrible, with terrible consequences, you have to now pay attention to why it actually happened. It happened because people are pretending that trans people are under the gun, that they are being harmed, that there is a trans genocide. Look at this NBC News article. An NBC News article talking about how trans people are already scared and now they're terrified that there's going to be a backlash. Well, why were they scared? Because people disagreed with them. Because people didn't want individuals transitioning young people or allowing drag queens to grind on 3-year-olds. That's why they were scared. Nobody didn't want them to exist. Nobody was committing trans genocide. Most of the trans people who are murdered by their lovers. That's what's going on in the trans community, and there is no trans genocide. You'll see statistics about 30 or so trans people who were killed last year, or 100 or so trans people killed over the last couple of years. Like, it's a massive number of individuals, and the argument is that they're being killed by people because of their transness, and this just is not the fact. Right-wingers are not going around and killing trans people. To say they are is an absolute joke. Now, the clip you saw earlier, Sink Younger of the Young Turks, making the argument that trans people need to arm themselves because right-wingers are coming for them, is a completely ridiculous and stupid argument.
I'll be a little bit of a hypocrite here, but it's not. I'll explain why I'm saying it. I don't like guns. I would ban assault weapons in a second. We can go on and on about the gun control that we need in this country. And I always tell people, don't get guns. It'll make you less safe. I'm gonna make an exception here for trans people. They are actually in danger. They have had hundreds of laws passed against them. They have right-wing media ginning up fear against them 24/7. They are targeted more than any other group in America. And if anyone should get guns, it should be trans Americans, okay? Because I'm worried for them. I'm worried that the right-wing lunatics are going to attack them as they have over and over again. And by the way, it's not just right-wing lunatics, other people attack trans folks as well.
All of this was in response to Tucker Carlson laying out that there were people online, like this guy, making the point that trans people need to arm themselves. And they need to arm themselves in order to protect themselves against society, which again is not true. And Tucker Carlson did an entire segment where NPR was making this exact argument too.
So you can imagine our surprise. The other day, we're driving through Cambridge in the old hybrid Subaru, adjusting our surgical masks to cover both nose and mouth, and listening, needless to say, to National Public Radio, the voice of menopausal liberalism. And as we're listening, we hear this. We're going to play it for you and see if you can understand our total shock.
Mass shootings targeting LGBTQ spaces and a rise in anti-trans rhetoric have inspired some queer people to take up arms. New Hampshire's Public Radio Todd Bookman joined a monthly gathering of a gun group that sees firearms as key to their own self-defense. And as you might imagine, this story does include the sound of gunfire.
On a recent Sunday morning, the parking lot of Pawtuckaway State Park in southeastern New Hampshire is filling up with hikers. There's also a different crew, packing up warm clothes and weapons.
Thank you all for coming to Rainbow Reload.
Your anti-trans rhetoric makes the trans community carry guns. Rainbow Reload! They're packing heat. They'll be appendix carrying in more ways than one. Watch out. Wait a second, we thought. This is NPR, National Public Radio, suddenly telling you that actually guns are good. They're valuable tools of self-defense, really against you. The Biden administration hired a kid to oversee nuclear waste disposal whose only qualification was his sexual fetishes. So no, There's not genocide going on. There's some weird affirmative action program going on. But if you listen to NPR, you wouldn't know that. And that kind of talk might scare the heck out of you. And if they encourage you to go get a gun and arm yourself because Nazis are taking over Vermont, you might do it. Again, we're as for guns as you could possibly be. But this seems like an incitement.
When you tell people they are under attack and they need to arm themselves to protect themselves, they're going to do it. Okay? And now in the hierarchy of victims, there is no bigger victim in our society today than trans people. And they're trying to create more trans people and create fear in that community. There are no right-wingers coming to kill trans people. Disagreeing with someone is not violence. Saying you should not transition minors is not violence. And framing it as violence has devastating, deadly consequences. And if you look at this tweet by this guy who we talked about in the beginning, you can read very clearly what he says. Right wing seems to be celebrating that the Nashville shooter was trans, as if that vindicates them. What the blank? Doesn't that prove that maybe you guys shouldn't bully people about who they are? If you think the answer is more bullying, you miss the point and are probably a terrible person. That's right. That's right. You're probably a terrible person. Not the individual who is making the argument that the guy who murdered 6 people had a good point and you should listen to it. You're the bad person. This is what they're going to try to sell us after this tragedy, after this massacre, after this atrocity, and nobody's buying it.